Are you guys energized? Yeah. Okay, Hassam was talking about being like unreasonable and crazy. I don't know if I'm feeling that right now, but I'm excited about this panel because they are. And we have 35 minutes, and I'm going to be kind of the bad cop a little bit because I want to hear from you guys, and we want to get as many questions. So I'm going to dive right next to it. I'm going to get the panelists, amazing panelists here to say their names and then kind of give their status about the female entrepreneurship. So I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you so much, Manal. My name is May Kaiser. I'm the chief strategist and founder of The Grid. I started The Grid in Dubai. I'm Dubai-based. I'm currently spending time in the UK trying to develop the business here as well. We help companies raise their profile through sharing content. We work mostly with professional service firms, law firms, advisory firms, audit firms, private banks, etc., to reach an audience or a relevant audience through empowering them with actionable information.
You can say something about the
women
state of female entrepreneurs.
Okay, so I'm originally Lebanese Australian. I came to Dubai 9.5 years ago with an investment bank as their head of HR. At the time, London said, no, we can't send you because you're a woman and you don't speak Arabic. But I got there. So what I find in Dubai, and I'm really just speaking about Dubai, and most of my circle are other expat women. Expat meaning both Western, Arab, Asian, etc. And what I'm finding is that there are a lot of women entrepreneurs there because the opportunity exists. And Dubai is really a springboard for the region, I think you would agree. And because of its openness and also because of its geographic location. We, as The Grid, have put out a lot of content from startups and women and men startups, but there's a lot of opportunity in fintech, in logistics, in telemedicine, etc. So that's what I think.
Great, thank you, Ray.
Opportunity.
I think I've done my introduction, so sure, you go ahead.
Thanks, Manal. Thank you for Mentor for moderating our panel, and thanks to Najat for inviting me to be here today. So I'm the CEO of Emirates Foundation, which is the national foundation of the UAE, and our focus is on youth development, so everything from helping young people to become more entrepreneurial to helping them become engaged citizens as volunteers and many other areas. My background is I'm an Arabist, so I studied Arabic at university and subsequently went on to study sustainable development. And I've been in the Middle East for 20 odd years now, and I'm very passionate about sustainable socioeconomic development in the Arab world. And I'm on a personal crusade now to create jobs for Arab youth. I think it is single-handedly the most important developmental challenge of the region, and I think the solution is enterprise. I've done some work in both my current role and in my earlier role when I was working with Shell Foundation and looking at social enterprises, and I currently chair the Arab Foundations Forum, which is a regional network of foundations. And in most of those organizations, we've done research around the importance of enterprise as a solution for both youth engagement and for the multiple political ramifications of having the highest level of youth unemployment in the world, and we all know what they are. We are working at Emirates Foundation to promote the enterprise ecosystem in the UAE, and research shows that there are basically 5 key ingredients that you need. So for 20 odd years now, I've been in the Middle East, and we've been talking about the need to create jobs for Arab youth. The UNDP Arab Human Development Report has been citing that as a core regional development challenge for over 20 years. For 20 odd years, we've been throwing millions of dollars at the problem of trying to encourage young Arabs to become entrepreneurial, set up their own businesses and scale them up. And yet here we are 20 years later, we still have the highest level of youth unemployment and, as Lubna said, one of the lowest levels of female labor force participation in the world. And we're still scrabbling around for solutions around youth engagement and radicalization. And yet we know that creating jobs is difficult, but it's not rocket science. You can actually create scalable, sustainable jobs, good jobs, as Jim Clifton calls them in his excellent book called The Coming Jobs War, We can create them. We know how to create them. It's been done in other parts of the world, and it can be done in the Middle East. But there are 5 core ingredients, and they're fairly simple, and all of you have touched on them in the course of the day. They are patient capital, so not just capital where you throw it at entrepreneurs and think they're going to create. Patient capital that is cash flow based, that will stay with you for the long term until you're financially viable. Regulatory reform, Lubna has talked about that, and we know how important that is in the Middle East. If it's going to cost me $10,000, $20,000 to set up my own business, I'm simply not going to do it. Access to supply chains. We know that in various parts of the region, there are a lot of parastatal companies or even government-owned entities that are quite structured, that make it difficult for startup entrepreneurs to penetrate them. Entrepreneurial acumen, business training, and perhaps the most important, finally, for women in particular, is non-financial support. So really technical assistance. So some of the things we've been talking about earlier, how do you register your IP, and how do you set up an entity? So each one of those 5 verticals exists in various different forms across the region. In the UAE alone, we've seen multi-million-dollar funds set up to support enterprise. And we know from Jordan to Palestine to Egypt, there is capital out there. The Middle East is not short of capital that is focused on enterprise, but it's not patient. Building business acumen. We all know every other foundation and their friends has an enterprise training program. Many of them last for 1 day. That's not going to be enough to help you build the skills to set up a scalable enterprise. Various governments now are slowly but surely looking at helping young entrepreneurs access supply chains, but it's a long and tedious process. Registering your startup entity with any government entity can take months, if not years. Mentoring exists, but it's sporadic. So the non-technical assistance is there, but how many young entrepreneurs know, for example, that you can actually get quite a lot of pro bono legal advice when you're a startup? How many people know that? Not too many. So all of those 5 metrics are there, but none of them are there in a comprehensive framework in any one single Arab country. And we believe that if one could advocate for the presence of all 5 of those inputs across the Middle East, where, notwithstanding its heterogeneity, you also have a lot of commonality, that you could actually fast-track job creation in the Middle East and deliver not just on SDG 8, but actually accelerate it. The challenge at the moment is that regional governments are not working together to create a region-wide enterprise ecosystem, and that even within individual countries, some of those very important inputs, such as capital, do exist in abundance, but don't have the right characteristics. They are not, it's not risk capital, and it's certainly not patient. So I think the challenges that are facing women entrepreneurs in the Middle East are actually very similar to what are facing their male counterparts, in that they go up against each one of those 5 particular issues. But added to that is they also have the challenge of access to the public sphere. And that's something we can come back to.
Yeah, that's great.
Hello, my name is Ruth Sachs. Contrary to what it says up there, I've now left Westminster Business School and I'm embarking on my 2nd entrepreneurial career. I'm moving into the area of building on my experiences of many years into leadership, change management and strategic consulting, and looking particularly at the work of supporting women in creating and developing, whether it's their identity and career as entrepreneurs or within their own organisations. And I'm particularly known for supporting women who are looking to achieve non-executive and executive roles. I think it's really important. We know that women who gain board level positions are in positions to change the thinking of boards, to change the decision making, and also the risk taking of boards. And I think that's absolutely essential in changing how organisations work, how they look forward, and how they project their images to the future generations. We're here to talk about entrepreneurship, not just as to what it is now, but what it's going to be like, and how we're going to prepare the young people of today for the careers of tomorrow. If we think back 5 or 10 years, things that we do now didn't exist then. So how do you get people to be creative and to recognise and value that difference is important and it's useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I am Manel Elatir, the head of Asila. We are a social business focused on empowering women and preserving traditional craft. And I'm going to dive right to my favorite topic, which is failure. And I see it with smiling because I hope that the future of failure, for us to talk about it in a really positive way, as a way of a step up, as a stone. So I'm going to turn to Lubna, and if you can just tell us a little bit, how can we get this next generation to change that concept of how they look at failure, and also how can the culture actually change, moving from looking at it as a bad thing to more of a positive thing?
Thank you. Such a brilliant question. Where people are always, nervous about failure. Now, how I see failure, there's a right way to failure, and there's a wrong way to failure, and how we actually learn from failure. All what failure does is it basically identifies the loopholes in any business operation, weaknesses, whether it's lack of governance or lack of operational tools, whatever it may be. Entrepreneurs are probably too busy focusing on financial targets. They're distracted by meeting the demands of their clients' needs. But failure for me is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to identify the weaknesses in your business model. And that's not going to happen when things are all very good. It's not going to happen, when you're doing so well in your business. It's only going to happen in times of distress, whether there's a market stress condition or a force majeure event, whatever it may be. But it's in times of difficulty, failures may happen or otherwise. But it's a fantastic opportunity to identify what has gone wrong, and how can I mitigate the risks better next time, or prevent that next time failure. And why did I start with saying there's a right way to failure and a wrong way to failure? Because the wrong way, right? The wrong way to when you react to failure is when you spin that into a win. You create that blaming culture within your organization and finger point that, it was your mistake, or you blame whoever it may be. That's wrong. And you're not going to learn from that. The right way to react to failure is very much to understand what has gone wrong. It probably would require a bit of soul searching, acknowledging the mistakes, and communicating to yourself and to your team. So you calculate your risk better in the future.
Thank you so much, Lubna. Going from there, I think that also I'm a mother. That's my other enterprise. I'm a mother of 3 girls under 3, so I have a lot of gray hair underneath. But one of the things is, how do you work on yourself, right? Somebody said earlier that it's all in the self. Failure is also understanding who we are, investing in ourselves, in all this non-support, like non-financial support. And I'm going to turn to you, Claire, to really give us, you touched upon it earlier, really give us how can the non-financial support work more together and be more effective to actually scale, not only just support, but scale women's initiatives?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think non-financial support, or BDA as some organizations call it, business development assistance or technical assistance, I think it's as important as capital, because we see many cases of where entrepreneurs actually have had access to capital, but simply haven't had the commercial or business acumen to be able to deliver a scalable business. And I think it's particularly a challenge for women in the Arab world because of this lack of access to the public sphere. So clearly, increasingly, we have some great metrics in the region around women and their level of education. But having a high level of education helps, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee you access to the public sphere. So that access to the public sphere, what does that mean? Well, it means basically, to me, it's 2 things. One is confidence, so having self-belief that you can actually deliver on this. And 2, it's about having networks. So if you don't have professional networks, and many successful women in the Middle East struggle with this, if you don't have professional networks, then it's actually a lot harder for you to access resources than it is for men. And that could be financial resources, it could be the pro bono lawyer, it could be understanding how to market your product. It can simply be events like this. So you may find a lot of female young startup entrepreneurs in the region that would love to come to an event like this, but may be wary about it because they're going to be in the public domain and they may feel social pressure on them around that. So at Emirates Foundation and beyond, and some of my work beyond, we found there's a hugely powerful input for female businesses is mentors. Having a male mentor even, not just a female mentor, but a male mentor who can help you open those doors can absolutely lead to success in terms of scalability. I personally think role models are hugely important for female entrepreneurs, especially young women, young Arab women. When they see another young Arab woman that has been successful, just seeing one other role model can have a mind-blowing impact on that. Wow, she was able to do it? So maybe I can. I think that's also very important. And also having this coaching, sort of the step before mentoring, just the coaching, the basics on financial acumen. I don't have any scientific evidence for this, but I have this intrinsic feeling that men, maybe because of their access to the public sphere at an earlier age in the Arab world, tend to have stronger business acumen than women because they've been out there from an early age. They may have been following their father in his business. They may have been in the majlis every Friday afternoon. So they tend to have a better feel for the commercial acumen of how a business runs. And women are deprived of that if they don't have access to the public sphere. So that's why I think, non-financial input to a business is important for all entrepreneurs, but it's particularly important for women because it builds their confidence, it builds their networks, and it gives them voice.
Yeah, and I'm going to move, talking about networks, another amazing new platform technology, and how it's really kind of moving things forward and getting us together and getting the knowledge spread so quickly. How is that affecting the next generation of women entrepreneurs?
I know with my own business that we are really a digital team, and so when we work with companies on video production, for instance, to get their content out, we have people in Berlin. Marketing, we have somebody in Australia, and basically we don't need a bricks and mortar office, so that's a reduced expense. There are also tools, Google Docs, etc., Evernote. There are ways that we can work. It's so much easier to have your own business. I'm just going to give an example of somebody in the Middle East who is the CEO, a woman called Luma, who is the CEO of a e-commerce platform. And she's actually paving the way in terms of logistics and digital strategy in e-commerce. And I don't know if anybody knows what the percentage of e-commerce online sales are in retail in the Middle East. Does anybody? In the UK, I think it's 11-12% of all retail sales. Does anybody know what it is in MENA? Do you want to hazard a guess? It's 2%. Yeah, it's 2%, so there's huge potential. And Amazon, as you know, has just recently acquired Souk.com, which is the biggest English and Arabic e-commerce platform in the Middle East. So Luma, we actually interviewed her, and we wanted to get really actionable information from her to pass on to other people, other entrepreneurs. And basically what she's discovered are things like, she's discovered and she's innovated around it. So basically in the Middle East, 80% of consumers they prefer cash on delivery. They don't want to use their credit card online. Younger people are happier to do it. So what they do is basically they turn up at your door. The platform sells women's clothing. They turn up at your door with a credit card machine, right? So they're kind of introducing you to the idea of paying, with credit, but it's not online, right? The other thing is, they really have studied consumer behavior, and in countries like Saudi Arabia, for instance, where if you're the delivery guy and you're delivering clothing, you don't call up a female and say, what's your name, where's your address, right? And turn up at her door, because that'll get her into a lot of trouble. So it's really to say, okay, what is the closest collection center? And for the e-commerce business to set up the infrastructure, you have to work around the culture. You're not going to change it overnight. Other things that she's shared with us, and this is, this is great information for anybody going into e-commerce in the Middle East. 80% of people surf surf the website during their lunch hour, and those people go home and they make the purchase on a mobile, and 90% of them on an Android. I mean, fascinating stuff, right? Really interesting. So all of these things, I think you'll see, there are women who perhaps they're working in what are traditional women, women businesses, but they are at the forefront of, digital strategy and logistics when it comes to certain segments like e-commerce.
Great. Can I just come back to some of the things that Claire was saying about the need for young women to understand more about what's going on and how that works. I think, and get into networks particularly. And I think it isn't just a women's issue. I think everyone in this room has a responsibility in encouraging other people, engaging them in their networks, introducing them, bringing them in, particularly in MENA countries or wherever there are challenges. If you know that there are people who could benefit from the network. Networking isn't just about, here's my business card, what job or what project have you got, but here, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what I can offer. Getting people to understand that networking develops. It's not a straight line from here I am to what the next job is. In the same way, mentoring and coaching, you can have reverse mentoring where you get the younger people to talk to you about what you do, how you do it, and them asking questions that get you to think differently. I think those are really important. And in terms of role modelling, and you need to have stories. The more stories that people tell, whether they're in events like this or in online journals or where people will look and find out about these different things, all of these things encourage not just young women but young men too to go out and see what else is there for them to take.
Thank you very much, Ruth. We are doing very well on time, and I'm very excited to open the floor for questions. So I would like to know, anybody who has a burning question, please keep it to question, not comment, so we are able to get as much interaction as possible with our amazing panelists.
I have a question as a criminal lawyer.
Oh dear.
It frightens me that you encourage people to use credit cards because I think my voice is big enough. But anyway, I think there are inherent dangers lurking. The massive billion-pound fraud that is lurking behind the door is absolutely phenomenal. And I think encouraging blindly, I'm talking to our friend here, May, who wants everybody to go out, and I'm not so keen on it anymore because I have seen cases. I mean, I don't want to be entertaining.
Do I have to argue with you?
Maybe.
You will win, no doubt. But I'm saying that in reality, I've done cases which are absolutely horrific, where people's savings have been completely and utterly emptied. And I can tell you, I really think we must not, especially in societies who are not aware of the inherent dangers of that. So that's just
Michelle, that's not a bad thing at all because it keeps us lawyers in business all the time.
I can go into comedy or Sheffield.
But also, if I can just say, I think that's a very valid point. Maybe the Middle East, in a way, is ahead of its time in distrusting credit cards, or perhaps ahead of the curve or something. But I think the only reason it's possible in the Middle East to go and deliver something and have all these people running around delivering like this is because you've got cheap manpower from the subcontinent that allows that, right? So yes, it's many layers there, I think.
But I think also it's an inevitability. So if you look at, I used to work for Visa, if you look at the personal consumer expenditure rates of the Middle East, it's tiny. It's something like 5% of all personal payment in the Middle East is by credit card. Most of it is cash transactions. We know that's how things are. So it's only going to grow. So you can't avoid it. So the issue is, how do we educate people, young people, on how to use their credit cards? So I see cases where I have some of my colleagues have 10 credit cards. And now any electronic payments company will tell you how to manage your online expenditures to make sure you're checking your accounts regularly so that you personally know what's coming and going. Because if you report any fraudulent activity soon enough, you're not necessarily legally liable. Now, if you have 10 credit cards and that's the average and you're 25 years old, it's not like you're a multi-million-dollar business person, then that's a problem. So I think there's a huge need for education around online expenditure, but clearly that is going to be the future for any new startup industry. I mean, we see the vast majority of new startups, young people in the Arab world who want to become entrepreneurs are all looking at tech as the underlying platform. So one cannot ignore that electronic payments have to be an inevitability and the way of the future.
Great. We have another question. Go ahead.
This question is for Lubna and Claire, and it is regarding the ecosystem development and potential collaborative models within the stakeholders in Middle East region. The question is, what are 2 or 3 top frustrating challenges that you are facing at this point of time in terms of ecosystem development, one. And second, which is kind of a piggyback on the first one, which stakeholder has been more forthcoming in terms of this idea of ecosystem collaborative models? Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to take that first? And I'll...
Sure. Well, I would go, my top 2 favorites are, and I've touched them already. So first of all, capital. So it is shocking when you run around the Middle East how many countries have an SME fund. Every man and his dog has an SME fund in the Arab world. Every government has tried to do some kind of SME, small to medium-sized enterprise funding. And yet, here we are, after sometimes these funds have been in place for 10, 20 years, still having a very low level of enterprise as a contribution to GDP in the region. So that would suggest, one would think, that the nature of the capital being supplied to the market is not meeting the demand of the entrepreneurs. And I think it's shocking that there hasn't been a region-wide conversation about that. Why don't we have more angel investing? Why don't we have more crowdfunding? Why do big government SME funds end up being highly bureaucratic, not market-based, and not sustainable? So the return on the capital is low. They don't return the capital. So some of the largest SME funders in the region are giving out grants or very low risk capital. And by the way, I'm not against grants as particularly from foundations for buying down initial startup risk. But over the longer term, you need much more, obviously, sophisticated and patient capital. So I think if one were to do a piece of research around how much particularly government capital has gone into enterprise in the last 20 years and looked at a number of scalable, sustainable businesses that have come out of that, I think it would be a pretty horrifying metric. And the second one, as I said before, is supply chains. My goodness, it's difficult to access a supply chain in the region, especially in the Gulf if you are a startup. Many government entities will ask you to register as part of their online supply chain first. That in and of itself can take you 12 months. So if you are a startup and you are trying to target government business, and let's face it, in the Gulf, often the majority of economic activity is public sector based, then it's hugely challenging. And then if you go to the corporates, many of them have very centralized supply chains. Again, very difficult to access. Dubai is doing some great work, actually. So our partners, Dubai SME, are doing some great work now at trying to make the supply chain for government entities much more accessible to startups. So I think that's where a huge amount of progress can be made. And in your point of who has some of the solutions, so I'm biased, but I think philanthropic capital has a lot of flexibility. Philanthropic capital is risk-based, and philanthropists are supposed to be like the crazy scientists that come up with solutions and then give them to others to scale up. I think there's a huge opportunity in the Middle East at the moment. The amount of philanthropic capital is overwhelming. We are partners on the Coutts report for the annual survey, the $1 Million Giving report, looking at what's coming out of the GCC alone. And, there was one single donation last year that was $32 billion. So, it's a difference between how much is declared and how much is actually dispersed. But the point is, you have a huge pot of capital that's coming out of the region that, with the growing trend of family offices, obviously, ring-fencing capital for philanthropic purposes, that if it's deployed effectively and not in old school check writing, but looking at investing, creating a social and a financial return on investment, I think there's a huge opportunity there. And a lot of this capital, when it's coming from the younger generation of family offices, has huge appetite for enterprise. So there is definitely something there as a pool of capital that wants to be entrepreneurial, that's willing to take risk. That is the definition of philanthropic capital. It should be risk-taking, that I don't think has been even just at the very early stages of exploring that.
Thank you for that great question. Just adding to what Claire just said, there's a lot of young, in terms of the youth, the talent, the passion, the know-how, it's enormous in the region. And something you mentioned, Claire, is the grants. We are very generous in giving some of the grants, but I think what worries me the most, the lawyer in me, is that there's no governance around this. How is the grant given, the criteria, the selection process? There's no transparency around that. And that frustrates a lot of the startups. Why did he get it and why she couldn't get it? And I think that's very important that we communicate that. Was it because her business plan was better than his business plan? And I think also what we need to really encourage some of our SMEs or startups or the entrepreneurial spirit of our youth is encourage them to diversify, encourage them to explore territories which have been unknown or not tested. We have plenty of cupcake entrepreneurs. We have plenty of hair salons. Would you agree? Salons. Yeah. But then comes an entrepreneur who has a very unique idea, and suddenly we're very reluctant to give this grant to somebody who's got a unique idea. And what is that? Is it fear? Why is this reluctance? I don't understand. That's one of the biggest challenges. Another challenge which faces a number of entrepreneurs is cost of doing business. Cost is increasing. I'm only going to speak on behalf of UAE. I can't speak on behalf of the entire MENA region. But I definitely, I think we really need to find ways of how can we keep the cost to the minimal for the young startups. You have innovatively and creatively done some great work to keep your costs down. But we're talking about fresh graduates. They may not be brave. They may not have had that 20 years of great experience you've had. So how do we keep the cost to the minimal for these startups, for these entrepreneurs, so we encourage them to flourish and do more? And last but not least, the regulatory framework. I think there's a lot of work to be done in creating the awareness. I think a lot of startups, they get the grant, this generous grant, and then they're not accountable at the end of the year of how have they used this grant. And they probably 9 out of 10 fail. Right? Because they haven't had the right legal support, they're not aware, they're not financially aware. So I think there's a lot of work, a lot of education to be done, both with the entrepreneurs, different stakeholders. I think it's an exciting time, but I think we need to start picking up and having, I love that idea you just said, why aren't we having a regional dialogue, right? Because some of these problems and challenges are similar. So I'd encourage that.
Hi there. It's been a pleasure hearing you all speak. My question comes from my internal pessimism a little bit about kind of perception of female entrepreneurs and what can be done about it. So I know there's a lot that can be done for us women, but my question comes off the back of like a recent study from Harvard Business Review, which said VCs ask women different questions than they ask men, and women have to defend themselves more than men do and answer questions that men don't. So maybe this is more of a recommendation about teaching how to make women be more aggressive or how to confront these situations without being sheepish, which can be especially difficult in the Middle East. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about this or what can be done as a female entrepreneur who faces questions that make my eyes roll on a regular basis but have to answer.
Okay. Great question. it's not going to change overnight, right? And the attitudes and the perceptions are not only in the Middle East. I see it all around the world. I see it in Japan, I see it in India, I see it in Europe, I see it in America. And I think the time has come for men to lean in. I think women have worked so hard in the last 3 or 4 decades in grooming themselves and educating themselves, but yet the men haven't leaned in. The perceptions remain the same. But I think part of it falls on us. I think we will continue to educate, we will continue to collaborate with our male counterparts, and educate. The answer is in education. Don't allow those eyes to roll up next time someone asks a question. Correct the person who's proposed that question. Very recently, I was being interviewed by a journalist. And it has very much come to a point where I get annoyed by these questions. And I too often get asked, Lubna, how do you balance, you've got a demanding career, family, how do you balance this all? My reaction to his question was, how many male executives have you actually asked that question to? And he stumbled and he's like, oh, no, look, Lubna, it's fine if you don't want to answer it. And it wasn't very much I didn't want to answer that question, but why are we asking different questions to the men and women, and yet, nothing differs us from in terms of what we deliver, how ambitious we are. But look, I think we have a huge onus and a role to play in educating our male colleagues or business partners, and it's an evolution. And I think we're very grateful to where history has landed us. I mean, we've come such a long way. This is exciting times. Yes, the numbers may be still disappointing. We still want to see more female representation in the corporate world, in the government, in the boardrooms. But I think the ball has started rolling and there's no stop to this anymore. It's only going to grow stronger. Thank you.
I agree with you completely. I do think that men need to start leaning in. We can't do this on our own. I think... And it's not about being aggressive when we get those questions, because a woman only has to start to be assertive and immediately the response is, oh, you're so aggressive. That's about perception, it's about understanding. It's also about our frustration in not being able to express ourselves in the way that we want to. But I feel very strongly that men have to understand that the interview questions that we're asked should be the same, like as Lubna said, for whoever it is. If you're asked that question, the question is, are you asking that question of every applicant? And that helps people to stop and to think. There's also, we hear very much that men get really excited about women in senior roles when they realise their daughters are about to leave university and they can't get a job. My response to that is men need to be thinking about that all the time. When their daughters are born, if that's when it's going to really trigger something for them. It's also about talking to your sons. We should be on an equal plane. We should be able to demonstrate that we have different skills, we're better or worse or different in our abilities for different things, whoever we are. It's not about our gender. And that's what we need to start moving forward on, particularly in the commercial and an entrepreneurial world.
If I can just add, I love that that you said it's your internal pessimism, because I wake up with that a lot. I think that gender stereotypes are alive and kicking in the Middle East, I can tell you. Whether you're in the corporate world or whether you're an entrepreneur, being an entrepreneur means you're pretty much fair game. And I think that in the corporate world, at least, you have controls in place. You cannot say this to a woman, or you cannot send that text message to a woman after work or whatever. But when you're going in and you're talking to clients, I think you are pretty fair game, and you need to build that resilience and respect. It's hard. You're judged by a different measuring stick, right? And the fact that you have become an entrepreneur yourself means that you've got a fair bit of resilience, whether you're a man or a woman, right? But never believe that you're less than your experience. Never let anyone diminish you or intimidate you. And that takes a while. It's an interesting journey, yeah.
Well, I want to give a round of applause to our amazing panelists. And thank you, Najat, and to the Gazelle Group.